Gerald is that person who rules over one piece of the application. They're the only person who knows the ins and the outs of every class, method, pattern of that area of the code base, constantly tweaking and not letting others in. Maybe he doesn't even get code reviews because no one knows how to review his code. What can we say to Gerald? He picks up a story on that specific service again. Okay, Gerald, I noticed that you only seem to be picking up work related to this consumer event service. This has prevented the rest of the team from understanding that area of the code base. That's the outcome. Next sprint, and this is being direct, like here's something specific that you should do. Please pick up a feature outside of this service. Ideal outcome, like paint the picture of what better looks like. This is going to remove future bottlenecks in development and support of the application. It's going to help the rest of the team learn and also help you expand your knowledge of other areas of that application. Okay, let's talk through another example. We have Donna, the giant pull request, the person who comes back, maybe they pick up a task and 3 weeks later, it's like fully fleshed out. They're like, okay, I'm feeling really confident with this. They didn't get any reviews from, or they didn't collaborate, with other members of their team. So they go quiet, they come back with like this giant pull request. Maybe they are afraid of others seeing their work in progress, but this is resulting in a really low quality review. And again, it's just less collaborative. So that's kind of what you're feeling as a manager. All right, so what can we say? Donna, I noticed that you haven't shared an update on this feature in over a week. Lead into curiosity here, like how is everything going? Is there anything that I can do to unblock you? But this has prevented the rest of the team from understanding your progress. So here are some specific things you can do, next steps. Share daily updates. Ideal outcome, what is that going to do? Why is it important that she does this? It's going to promote better collaboration across the team. This also helps us understand and fix potential issues, with requirements. Okay, how about the person who is late consistently without notice, requiring others to catch her up because she misses key details? Okay, what can we say? Says Nita, I noticed that you arrived late to stand up the past 4 days. This caused a distraction to the team. They were required to repeat their updates, like very factual, right? Please try join meetings on time or just let us know if you'll be late. This is going to help promote better communication and expectations across the team. Now let's talk about catering feedback to different social styles. Now that we all have a shared understanding and vocabulary of what these social styles mean and again, how they might perceive different situations. Okay, so in both of these examples, that situation is going to be the same. So Taylor has a habit of checking in her code and moving on to the next task without really paying attention to the required upstream and downstream steps needed to bring that task over the line or like to full completion. So I'll let you read through that feedback, thinking about if Taylor was an analytical. Okay, so wrapping up, this section on feedback, I want us to note that, it's not you versus the person, it's us versus the problem. Again, we have to intend to help that person grow. We have a perspective we can share that they might not be aware of. And that's our role, to help make them aware of that perspective and that growth area. And so this feedback is, right, a tool for communication. It's really an observation with context. You might be wrong, right, in that conversation. You might be wrong. You might be missing a piece of context that they have that you didn't have. And that's why it's a conversation. But it's concise and it's focused. We're not piling on. So feedback is not a weapon. It's not an accusation. We're not using it to jump to conclusions. So let's look at an example. Like yesterday you arrived an hour late. That's a fact, right? We don't just want to say, hey, you can't be trusted because you arrived an hour late. Let's just stick with the facts. Yesterday you arrived an hour late, and here were the impacts of that. Okay, a few more tips, whenever possible, like trying to remove yourself from the equation can be effective. So, use of words like this can be offensive to some. I even heard too, someone shared an example of, that isn't even as effective as it could be. Like you could say, hey, use of words like this would be a little bit more inclusive than the words that you use. So again, giving them pointers to what better could look like. Or, focusing on the product and not the person. So instead of you wrote low quality code, like this code could be more performant with use of this. And I want to note that in order to really make feedback effective, it's all about how the way that person receives that feedback. So you can leave that conversation and be like, okay, I'm done. They got it. Like they know exactly what they need to do. That's not always the case. One, we have to make sure that they received that effectively. So we're checking back in on that. But then we have to acknowledge that there's other things that happen, right, after we give them that insight. So we give them that insight. They have to know what they need to develop. Then they also have to have the motivation to improve that feedback. Are they willing to invest the time and the energy? And sometimes it's a matter of capability. So sometimes maybe they don't have that skill yet. Maybe there's knowledge required. Maybe that's connecting them with a mentor or a resource, a training resource that they can leverage to work to improve that. So our work doesn't stop at just giving them that insight, making them aware of this perspective that you have. Other things have to happen in that pipeline in order for true growth to happen. Okay, but I also want to acknowledge that great feedback has to start with trust. Let's say you're a new leader on a team. You can't just jump in and start giving out feedback, right? People are like, who are you? And like, why does your perspective even matter? I don't trust you. So we have to like build that trust over time, before we start giving that feedback. And I think that's really essential. Let's talk about recognition, which is, of course, positive feedback, right? It's also our jobs to give positive feedback, not just constructive. And with this, I think it's so important that we're really specific. Because sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, you did a great job on that. Well, what exactly did I do great at? Let's be really specific so that people know, where their strengths are. I appreciate your attention to detail with this project. Your positive attitude in that meeting helped us get through this difficult decision, or your expertise with this has provided the team with a new perspective. Thank you for sharing this skill. So if I'm tempted to say, hey, great job, to a person who maybe led a presentation or facilitated a meeting, I want to get more specific. Like, what do I think was so great about that? And let's also acknowledge that not all recognition looks the same. So just as we're working to build trust with a person, we're also getting to know what type of feedback they might prefer. So some people are uncomfortable being recognized in front of like 100 people at an all-team meeting. Some might love that kind of feedback. Some might prefer just like a direct message when they did something awesome that you want to recognize. So get to know people and what they prefer for recognition. Okay, so we have a question here. And also, folks, please feel free just to use that Q&A widget. I'll keep an eye on that. Our question is, what if they are not willing to invest the time and the energy and are not capable? Okay, so I think these are two different questions. One, if they're not willing to invest the time and the energy, let's first of all let's point out the fact that, like, again, this is another perception. So, I'm perceiving that you are not willing to dedicate the time and the energy to address this growth area that we discussed. Give them that and let them respond. So maybe they are working on it. Maybe you're not aware that they're working on it. Maybe they aren't. So they're like, I don't think, this isn't something that's important to me. Then it's your role as a manager to say, like, how vital it is that they do address that. This is impacting your ability to do your job, or, this is putting your job at risk. Like making sure that they understand the severity of not addressing that feedback. Because sometimes we have, like I said before, like we assume that they know, what we are thinking, and it is not kind to not be very direct in the results of them not addressing that feedback. Right? We have to make sure that we're setting expectations too. And then for the second part, like, what if they're not capable? This is where your job comes in to say, like, okay, here are some key skills that I see missing. Look for those resources for them. Help connect them with someone. Do practices. I mean, this can range from a lot of things. Like maybe it's a technical skill. So maybe it's getting some like formal training, or maybe it's saying, maybe job alignment isn't correct. Like maybe it's about talking about, is a different role better for them? Okay, let's see. How can we trigger in simple steps a sincere and authentic culture of recognition in a new team? in the process to build its culture? Oh, this is an awesome question. Okay, so a couple ideas come to mind. One, like if you have like a weekly or like some type of recurring team meeting, maybe even start it out with like everyone's going to go around the room and do like popcorn recognition. So like, I'm going to say, okay, I'll start it off. I'm going to give Joe recognition. Joe's going to pick someone else to give recognition. So they can kind of pick who maybe they've worked with until you get to like the end of the line. So like, oh, Joe, thank you so much for, the comments that you left when you were reviewing my code. It really helped me learn more about this. It can be something so simple. So just get into the like habit of giving recognition that way in team meetings. Another thing you could try, I know some teams do this where I heard this idea. They did like so whether you do it virtually or in person, they had it's like a speed dating, but for feedback. So everyone had like Post-its and they had to post it for every other person on the team. And so they would write out like the feedback that they wanted to give to that person, both constructive and positive. And then over the course of however much time you need to get, everyone to pair up with each person, they would sit together and like share that feedback. And then they'd also hand them the physical Post-it if you're in person. So then that person had like those physical Post-its to go home with, reflect on and chat with their manager about. So that's another thing maybe you do on like a quarterly basis is this like, we call it speed dating feedback session. Okay, I'm just going to check these off as I get through them. Okay, let's see. What if you don't know their social style? Ooh, that's a great question. So again, social styles are observable traits. So hopefully over time, right, you're going to start, as you're observing them in meetings, in one-on-ones, you can start to pick up on some of those. But honestly, with every team I've been on, except I need to do with this most recent one, we took the social style questionnaire together. So don't be afraid to like do that as a team activity so that you can directly learn about and talk about your social styles. But I like this one because it is observable traits. So hopefully as you get to know that person, you can start to pick up on what that social style might be. And again, that book, People Styles at Work, is really going to dive deeper into each social style. I just did the very high level. So hopefully that will help you understand and get to know those social styles. Okay, so let's also normalize feedback. This kind of goes back to, that first question. Okay, so a lot of teams have like those 360 feedback tools. Those are awesome. Maybe you do them, quarterly or whatever, just collecting feedback from the key partners that you work with, your boss, people who report to you. That's a great way to do it. And then I did touch on those other ones, so like team meeting traditions. Maybe you started off with, recognition, for all of, my leaders, sometimes my leadership team, we always start like our offsites with, hey, here's something I really appreciate about you. Here's something I think that you could do better. So ways to normalize that, right? Okay, so we are at our third section of the day. Again, please don't forget to leverage that Q&A portal. We're going to walk through some conversation templates to facilitate career discussions with people on your team. So knowing that feedback should happen all the time. And I also like to set up time to specifically discuss career and growth and what that means to people. Knowing that in one-on-ones, you're oftentimes like very tactical, they go super fast. And so I like to carve out time on a quarterly basis to talk specifically about career and growth. Okay, so I'm going to provide, I think it's like 6 or 7 different templates that you can use or formats that you can use. And so what I do again is I just set up a quarterly career status, 45 minutes to an hour, in addition to those one-on-ones. And I say, this is kind of like choose your own adventure. I want the person to really drive the conversation. Of course, I'm, filling in details, kind of coaching, asking questions. But I say like, choose your own adventure. Here are some different options and bring your own if you want to. Okay, so these are the different formats that I'll walk through today. So step 1, you have them select a format. And I'll walk through what each of these are. Okay, number 1 is open questions. Maybe they're like, yeah, I'm just going to come and let's just chat about what growth means to me. So you can give them these questions beforehand and they can kind of reflect on them. And then you two can just talk together throughout that hour. You will learn a ton about what growth means to that person and how you can help them navigate their career. Okay, number 2 is this I'm a commitment to. I love this one because sometimes we set these like really high level goals like, I want to build quality software, or, I I have a commitment to being a good mentor. And sometimes they're like, I don't really know what that means and how to make progress on that. And so this one helps us get really low level. So let's say, or you could say, what are your commitment to this quarter? Okay, I'm a commitment to quality software. What does that mean to you? Let's get really specific so that we know at the end of the quarter if it is or isn't completed. Okay, so how are we going to do that this quarter? Again, these are binary. We know if they are or aren't completed. So what does it mean to you to write excellent documentation? And is there anything specific that you can set as a goal that we can track throughout this quarter? So this process isn't really documented well, so I'm going to take that on. Or, I improve test coverage. Okay, let's set a specific goal for us to track over the next quarter. Let's look at another example in this I have a commitment to format. I'm a commitment to innovate our ideas. Again, a little high level, what does that really mean to you? And how will you know if that's done at the end of the quarter? Okay, this is the third format. So categories of goals. Maybe you just have a tradition where you go through, let's pick a goal for each of these categories. So productivity, efficiency, education, personal development. And each quarter they set a really specific goal to align with each category. Here are some examples with that, with the process or efficiency, technical goals that they could select. I would argue that some of these are even too high level. So again, getting really specific. Maybe on the people leadership side, goals that they could select. Okay, so that's format 3. Format 4, anti-goals. I loved this one. I did this one with a couple of folks on my team one quarter. They chose this anti-goals. So the gist of this is you basically say, tell me what bad would look like. What is your worst possible day at work? Or what would your worst possible quarter look like? Some people said long commute, a day packed full of meetings. I feel burned out. I feel like I'm not challenged. And then we work backwards from there. So okay, what can we do to avoid this long commute or to avoid a day packed full of meetings? What are some things that we can change to make sure that we're not trending in that direction? So this one was really fun to set specific goals. Okay, next format is this personal growth plan. So asking a couple prompting questions. Again, they'll have this available so that they can come to that meeting really prepared. I want people to know me for this, or in the next 6 to 12 months, I want to get this done. Years from now, I want to do this. To further grow this quarter, therefore, I should focus on these skills. What will I do if I when, and who will support me and how? So just a really good, conversation facilitation guide there. Okay, last format 6, this one that I call zoom out. So in this, you have ISO, IC stands for individual contributor. So that engineer in your team to reflect on maybe a week before you meet, what are the things that you did really well? What are 3 things that you can work to improve? And then I also ask if they select this format to give me a heads up so that I can also reflect on that. So what were 3 things they did well? What were 3 things that we can work to improve? Question on a quarterly basis, you present these templates before and allow the team members to drive the discussion. Yep. That's exactly it. And I also, in addition to saying, yep, choose your own adventure, some people use the same format over and over again. So we just have a career doc that we, continue looking at each quarter, and maybe things change, maybe we talk about it, or some people select a new format every single quarter. And then, I really encourage that person to be driving it. I'm there as a coach to ask follow-up questions, to learn about that, because then I know that in the future, maybe there's an opportunity I see that is aligned with a goal, or, in one-on-ones, I could say, hey, at our last career status, you said it was really important to you that you don't have a long day of meetings. How has that been going? Have you discovered any meetings that you can shift to different times that are more convenient, or, anything that you've removed, or, has that surfaced any additional issues that we can talk through? Okay. And in that too, I like to also add throughout the course of the year, I'll stumble upon some like really interesting articles. And so each quarter, I also just like to say, yep, here are the format options, bring your own if you want. And here are some like inspiring articles about growth that I've discovered. So I like to add a new article that we can even chat, reflect on together, as well as that format. Okay, so we are on to our last section today on facilitating straightforward, productive, and enjoyable one-on-ones. Okay, of course, one-on-ones are essential for us technical leaders to leverage to really check in on people. I remember when I first became a manager, I would honestly dread these because I was like, I have to be so prepared. Like some people are so quiet and awkward and I hate silence. And so I would really dread those conversations. I was like, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to fill this time? But I realized that these are really the most important aspects of our role. We have them for a lot of different reasons, right? We're taking a pulse on the person, we're fostering trust, we're gaining alignment, we're giving feedback, we're discussing career direction, we're providing context as to like, what are we working on organizationally? How does their work tie into the bigger picture? We're celebrating wins. We're understanding what the person is thinking and feeling, and we're working to strengthen that personal connection. Now, again, if I had like one tip for myself when I first started at this, it's that I don't have to do all the talking. In fact, I should do the least amount of talking in that one-on-one, right? But I felt like it was up to me to make sure that I am fully preparing that agenda. What are we going to talk about? What can I share with them? But this meeting is actually meant for that other person, right? To speak their mind, to share their ideas, to solicit feedback. And so this requires like really excellent listening skills. It's listening without distractions, without glancing at your other screen to check in on an email or Slack, or without looking at your phone. It's so disrespectful to not give someone your full attention, especially in a one-on-one, especially when they report to you. And so if you find yourself really distracted by something or you need to address another situation urgently, just like ask if another time could work. I would much rather have someone say, hey, I am like distracted by X, Y, and Z thing, and I want to give you my full attention. So do you mind if we meet at this time instead? Okay, so great listeners, other qualities, right? They're focused on their attention on the other person. They're asking follow-up questions. They're paraphrasing, clarifying. They're observing that person's energy, their mood, their tone of voice. Do they have high or low energy today? What is their body language saying, perhaps? What isn't being said here? Tactically, I like to have one-on-ones regular, scheduled, usually weekly, depending on the size of your team, but minimum every other week for 30 minutes. They're rarely missed. If you need to move them out, adjust that time, just give them a heads up on why. And then, of course, they're focused on that team member. Okay, so the golden ticket for me to realize that these are so important and just get so comfortable, now they're my favorite meetings of the day, is to really prepare just like I would for any other meeting. And so what I like to do is just revisit our notes from last time, both personal, work-related topics. So we have just like a shared agenda. We use Google, so we have a shared agenda that we can both add to throughout the week. We can know and kind of prepare what we're going to chat about. And then I also make sure that I'm reviewing status updates beforehand. Let's not use that valuable one-on time just to talk through what they're up to and do they have an update on X, Y, and Z project. We can use other asynchronous or even meetings to discuss a status. This is the time for you to get to know that person and figure out how you can help them. Sometimes this also means we get into these coaching conversations, right? And this is an awesome and very empowering way to help someone grow. Asking questions that enable that person to reach a new perspective or a solution on their own. So if they come to us with a problem, we're not just saying, yep, here's exactly what you should do. So let's do a quick coaching recap, right? I think, again, this is a very empowering way for a person to come to a solution independently. So, this usually comes about in problem solving. So if someone comes to you with a problem, instead of saying oh, yeah, this is what I would do, let's actually start with active listening. So, what I hear you saying is this. Now, I want to acknowledge that it is so tempting, and sometimes it seems like it makes the most sense just to be oh, yeah, here's exactly what you should do, right? This is going to be our instinct to just give them advice. It's natural to say, here's what I would do in this situation. But at best, this is like a short-term solution. And they're never going to really learn how to solve similar problems in the future. Okay, so what we can do instead is really ask probing questions. So I want to introduce this GROW model that I love for effective coaching. Again, lots of books, lots of things you can find on this, but I'm just going to do a really high-level recap because I think it illustrates how you can guide someone to an answer so that they can solve that independently. Okay, so again, they come to the problem. Let's walk through this GROW model. So first, we're really helping them to establish a goal. Like, what is this problem that they're trying to solve? So we're asking questions like, okay, what's the result you're trying to achieve with this? Why is this important to you? What are the benefits if you solve this problem? Then we're getting to that current reality. So we're making sure that you and the person you're coaching really gain an awareness of that current situation. So really using patience, active listening, and not trying to rush that conversation. Then options. After we both have a really clear understanding of that situation, let's turn to what we can do to reach that goal. So again, this is going to take over the course of definitely 30 minutes, maybe longer, right? So we're not rushing that conversation. Okay, then way forward. So we're helping that person feel really confident that they, know what they're committed to. They know what they're going to do next. There's a clear action plan. Now, I want to acknowledge, too, that we're not always jumping into coaching, right? There are some things in which we should just guide and give feedback, such as, sharing, telling, educating. Coaching is more like active exploring and listening. So I think about things where I'm like, okay, where should I maybe not coach? When is it not appropriate to coach? I think there's certain situations like, hey, there's only one right answer. So let's not be like, where's the bathroom? Well, where do you think the bathroom is? How would you architect this building, right? That's going to be a little bit offensive and frustrating. Also, if the situation is dire, if it's, there's a production issue or we're hitting some timelines, let's just, guide and give feedback. And then later we can kind of jump into a coaching situation with that person so that they can also, learn. Let's see other things, maybe if they're just directly asking for your feedback, saying, hey, I'm really trying to work on this. Can you give me some specific feedback about this? Or, they're asking your advice, hey, I know you went through something similar. Can you tell me what you learned from that? Let's not get into coach in there. Let's make sure that we know when it's appropriate to guide and give feedback versus coach. Okay, so not forgetting to hold, them accountable by following up on those commitments. So we're using those one-on-ones, hey, let's check in on this next time. Also knowing, coaching really takes that patience and empathy, remembering that this approach isn't always going to be, the right thing. And so, kind of reading the room per se and making sure that you are guiding and giving direct feedback when it's clear that they're, maybe still struggling to work through that problem. Okay, now just to end, I want to share some of my favorite one-on-one questions that I like to use in most of our career statuses. Our one-on-ones. And then I'll also share some traditions that I also find helpful. Okay, so the first one is what's on your mind? Let's just jump right into this one. I like this because it says, let's talk about what matters to you right now at this given moment. Here, you're going to uncover, what is top of mind? What are they struggling with? What is going well for them? What's currently harder than it should be? I love this one because here we can understand, what processes are holding people back. What are some tweaks that we can make to the experience on this team that would make life easier, more enjoyable? Who is legitimately stressed on the team? I also like to ask, how can I help? I like to really stay curious. I think too much of our day is spent doing things that we think people want us to do when sometimes we can just straight up ask how we can help. Okay, other ways to ask the kind of general, how are you doing, sharing feedback, sharing org updates, sharing team things with them in one-on-ones. We have a question on affirming feedback versus confirming feedback. I honestly don't know. I haven't heard that. So if anyone else has a response to that, that would be awesome. I'm going to look into that for next time. Okay, other ways we can maybe structure those one-on-ones. Let's talk about wins. Let's talk about updates. Let's talk about roadback blocks, concerns, and feedback. Now, I know some people really like to have like the same structured agenda for each one-on-one. That's awesome. Some people want it like more open. So also even like when you first start meeting with them, kind of ask them what their preference is for one-on-ones. Maybe you have the same exact structure every single time. And that's perfect. Okay, another question. How do you like the prompting question? What are your distractions? Oh, I like that. The purpose of this question is to encourage conversation about how I can help as a leader and coach to gain focus on the essentials. I love that. So what are your distractions? Yeah, this can help us identify like blockers, or just say, yeah, oh, if they're distracted by like, oh yeah, I'm really confused about X, Y, and Z. Perfect. You hop in and see where you can help as a leader. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. So what are your distractions? Okay, let's talk about that first month of one-on-ones could look like. I would highly recommend just focus on getting to know that person. It's so tempting to jump into the tacticals, but when you are first forming that relationship, again, we're working to build that trust so that we can be effective at giving feedback in the future. That trust is really like that currency that we're going to have to pull from in those maybe more difficult conversations or difficult updates or difficult feedback. So focusing on building that trust is so essential in those first one-on-ones and getting to know each other. Also acknowledging that like one-on-ones are used to build, again, and foster that relationship. And this requires you to also share more than just your professional self and encouraging them to do the same. So in each of my one-on-ones, I like to start with, I call it peach and pit. So peach is like, what's the best thing that happened to you this week? It can be either personal or professional. And then pit, what's the worst thing that happened to you this week? What did you really struggle with? Personal or professional? And then we also do ratings. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like the best day of your career, from a professional standpoint, how are you doing right now? And then I can engage in like, okay, like what can we do to get this to a 10? Or what would a 10 look like? And that helps us. Again, sometimes we spend like almost the entire one-on-one just chatting through those, right? You can uncover a lot of really interesting information that you wouldn't normally have, right? So, okay, we have peach and pit, and then we also have ratings. So I just covered professional. And I also like to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, from a personal standpoint, how are you doing? Knowing that, sometimes things are going on in life that makes it difficult for them to be their best selves at work. And so even if they don't want to disclose exactly what's going on, if they're like, yeah, my personal is a 3 right now, so that's why I might seem distraction. That's why I might not be, giving, everything that I can. Just good, of course, as their leader to be aware of those. Okay, so course recap, and then we have plenty of time. I skipped our break today. We have plenty of time for any additional questions that you have. But our course recap, I hope that you had an opportunity to, again, get to know your social style, get to know others' social styles, start thinking about where people on your team map, and those potential blind spots in your ability to lead or collaborate with others effectively. We also walked through, that formula for giving effective feedback. We walked through some conversation templates that you can use to facilitate growth conversations with people on your team. And then lastly, we walked through